Hello, the Pioneer viewers. How are you? I hope you're healthy and well. I'm in the place where I'm the happiest to be, so I'm in your presence. Today, we will continue to analyze the latest developments in the Russia-Ukraine war with a map. According to the latest reports, the clashes continue unabated on the four front lines where the clashes intensified, especially the Donetsk front line can be seen as the region where very furious clashes are taking place. Despite all its efforts, the Russian army is unable to achieve significant results in its attempts to advance. We will discuss the defense on the Donetsk front line in a moment. As we discussed in our previous report and agenda, the Russian army is in a difficult situation across the front line. This difficult situation is not only due to the clashes, especially the chronic problems within the Russian army aggravates its difficult situation. Although Ukrainian forces have reduced the frequency of its attacks on the Kherson front line, Russian forces are melting due to the problems of deficiencies along the front line. So, what is the latest situation on the front line? Let's take a look at the developments together. As the Pioneer team, we continue to bring the Russia-Ukraine war to your screens. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so as not to miss our daily map reports and reports on the agenda. You can also support me and my team by using the super thanks button below the video. This support will make us very happy. Let's start if you are ready. The Pioneer reporting. Let's start with the Kherson front line. According to the latest reports, the fighting between the Ukrainian armed forces and the Russian armed forces is continuing in the direction of Krinky, as it has been for the past few days. It is possible to say that the clashes here have become quite routine. From time to time, Ukrainian Marines increase their pressure on the east bank of the river. In recent days, we can say that the aim of the Ukrainian Marines here is to wear down the Russian troops into the region. Therefore, there are no border changes recorded in the latest reports. The Ukrainian armed forces continue to protect their bridgeheads to the large extent. Let us continue with the artillery activity in the region. According to the latest reports, Russian artillery units targeted Antoniivka, Dniprovkov, and Vermavsky. In the Veletsniv, in turn, artillery units of the Ukrainian armed forces targeted Ola Peristan, Kardashinka, Pulitsny, Oleshki, Pechanivka, and Poima. Now let's continue our daily map report by analyzing the latest developments on the Zaporizhia front line. According to the latest reports, the western part of the Robotny, where the Russian armed forces have been under pressure for some time, is still active. Russian attacks on this region continue. We see that the Russian artillery is quite furious, especially in the Russian attacks. However, Russian troops were largely repulsed. Ukrainian armed forces continue to hold their positions. As you know, during the counter-offensive operations, the Ukrainian armed forces also tried to capture Novoprokopivka. However, only part of this town was liberated. Russian troops continued their offensives against Novoprokopivka in order to recapture this part. We see that the Russian armed vehicles are especially active in this region. However, Ukrainian troops continue to hold their positions in this area. It is stated by local sources that many Russian armored vehicles were destroyed in this region. We see in the reports of local sources that there was a Russian attack on the Ukrainian bridgehead near Novofedoryovka. However, the attacks in this region were largely repulsed thanks to the successful defense of the Ukrainian armed forces. It is also claimed by local sources that the Russian armed forces suffered heavy losses in the clashes at this point. We can say that the similar situation has occurred in this region with the Donetsk front line. Let's continue by mentioning the artillery activity in the region. According to the latest reports, artillery units of the Russian armed forces targeted the Novodanilivka, Orikhiv, Novoandriivka, and Mali-Sherbiaki directions. In turn, artillery units of the Ukrainian armed forces targeted positions of the Russian armed forces in the directions of Kopani, Nestryanka, Novoprokopivka, Ichenkov, and Solatka Balka. Let's continue our report with the latest developments on the Donetsk front line. There is similarity in this area. On the Bakhmut front line, Ukrainian troops withdrew from the city center and set up their defenses further back. Later, during the counteroffensives, some areas were recaptured by the Ukrainian armed forces. According to the latest reports on the Donetsk front line, the Russian armed forces advanced from the southeast towards Novomikhailivka and attempt to squeeze the Ukrainian armed forces in the village. However, at the time of preparing this report, we have received allegations that the Ukrainian armed forces repelled the Russian armed forces in Novomikhailivka. However, this information remains allegations. We will provide you with this information if it's confirmed. The fighting in this region is quite intense. Ukrainian fortifications in this region pose a major threat to advance of the Russian armed forces. If this threat cannot be eliminated, the Russian armed forces cannot continue their attempts to advance. According to the reports, these fortifications is still present during the latest offensives. On the other hand, there are numerous reports that units of the Russian armed forces have launched attacks near Pobeda, Nevelskoye, and Permovskoye, Severnoye, west of Avdiivka from the southeast, east, and northeast of the city, in the Stepnoe area and towards Orychetin. However, these attacks were successfully repelled by the Ukrainian armed forces. The demarcation line between the two armies remains largely unchanged. The most important detail about the fighting in this area is the loss of Russian armored vehicles. As we shared many times in our previous reports, the region is known as the graveyard of the armored vehicles due to the losses of the Russian armored vehicles on this front line. We can also say that the region deserves this name. Indeed, the Russian army loses almost hundreds of armored vehicles every day during the clashes. This situation reduces the attack's capacity of the Russian army. Let's talk about artillery activity in the region. According to the latest reports, artillery units of the Russian armed forces targeted Ukrainian positions in the Nevelsky, Pobeda, Krasnohorivka, Permovsky, Severny, and Donetsk directions. In turn, artillery units of the Ukrainian armed forces targeted positions of the Russian armed forces in the directions of Valiodny, Pitski-Opitny, and Staromikhailivka. We continue with the Bakhmut front line. According to the latest reports on the Bakhmut front line, Russian forces continued their offensives near Andriivka in the northwest, the hills near Klishchivka, in the directions of Khromov and near Bogdanivka. However, during these attacks, the Ukrainian defense forces passed a successful test. The Ukrainian army continues to hold its positions. What do you think? Do you think the efforts of the Ukrainian army on the Kherson front line will yield the results? Do you think the Russian troops are being worn out? What are your opinions on the latest situation on the Donetsk front line? Do you think the Russian army will be able to continue advancing on the Donetsk front line? Let me know in the comments. I read and care about all your comments.